A couple days ago, I took down the beginning of Infinity website in protest related to the harassment that has been happening to me and my community from David Deutsch and his community. I've written a lot about this to explain what's going on and the historical context, and I wanted to do a video to talk about it and go through some of my writing. So the best place to look is this post called Harassment Summary, which links to the other posts, which there are quite a few of. So I will be doing some summarizing. I will not go through everything. So it starts with Andy B, which I believe is a pseudonym, a fake name. This person has used over 20 fake names in their harassment. There's earlier stuff, but this is the biggest issue. Started with Andy B because his harassment was a lot worse than what other people did. So, basic outline is Andy B harassed me, and Andy B was friends with David Deutsch's community, and I asked them to ban him, to stop giving him support in a community and stuff. And instead of doing that, they encouraged him and hate me and have kept him in their community. His harassment involves a variety of crimes, and most of David's close associates and community leaders openly, publicly talk with him on an ongoing basis after he was caught. And David himself tweets with Andy. So, first of all, what exactly happened? What did Andy do? This stuff is about the community that has been encouraging him and hating me and stuff they've said. For example, Dennis Hackathall, it was a community leader, a moderator on one of their forums. And he wrote a book which heavily plagiarizes me and David Deutsch. But anyways, he wrote on their semi-private forum, "I feel the pressure of agreeing with everyone about how much we all dislike Elliott." He was saying that the atmosphere of their forum was everyone is pressured to dislike Elliott and agree with everyone else about how much you dislike Elliott. So that is the kind of atmosphere they have, and that has led to harassment. Some of these people I have a lot of history with, but most of them I don't. Most of them barely know me, and we've had few or not even any conversations, and they hate me, and there's something weird about that, like the community is spreading hatred to people who don't know me, and shouldn't really have any reason to care about me. The only people I have a lot of history with are David Deutsch and Lily Tannett. And they're the only ones that I have, personal history with. Brett Hall was on my forums for a few years, maybe it was more than 5, 6 years or something. But on and off, he didn't post for months at a time sometimes. So, I know him a bit as, a forum guy, but it's not I know him well at all. I don't think we had any private conversations the whole time. I don't remember any. Anyway, Brett talks about me derailing and poisoning things. This, again, is the type of atmosphere of their community. He says he actively involves anything involving me. However, while saying he wants to avoid me, he also says, does anyone want to go on FI and save some of those poor souls? He says I'm beyond the pale. He's mischaracterizing what was happening quite badly. This was based on lies that Kate told him that he believed without checking with me or checking any sort of facts or primary source or something. Anyways, he thinks we're beyond the pale and that people should go help my victims. So he is encouraging people to go screw with my group while also saying he wants to avoid me. He accused me of ruining valuable communities, doing destructions and extermination. Those are the kind of accusations that justify harassing me. And he said some of these things to Andy. Another one, this is Dennis. He said that Elliott has insinuated violence towards me in the past, me being Dennis. This was a straight up lie. When I found out about it, I confronted him, and he retracted it because it was completely indefensible. He made an excuse that his English isn't very good, which is it's total crap. This is a guy who published a book in English. He lives in America, he works in America, his English is fine. He's not a native speaker, but he's been in America for a long time, He wrote a book in English. He can speak English. That's not the issue. The thing I actually said was something about not wanting to destroy his social status. And he claims that because he's bad at English, he misinterpreted that as threatening him with violence. And then did not confirm with anybody. Didn't ask me, didn't ask any of my friends, didn't ask any, of his friends who are better at English. So he somehow missed the not, that I did not want to do it. And then even setting that aside, it was destroying his social status or something like that. Like, not his person, not violence. Harming his reputation, something like that. I forget the exact thing, but it was along those lines. So that's not violence. Saying this is a libel. This is illegal. This is a factual claim about me, and the fact is false. And the thing he's accusing me of is actually illegal. So lying that someone did something illegal is illegal. I believe this is per se defamation. Normally with defamation, you have to argue that there are damages, but in some cases, a statement is viewed as obviously damaging, and just saying it is problematic. So for example, if you call someone a drug dealer, everyone knows drug dealers are awful, and this is a horrible accusation. So it's considered, it's assumed damaging in certain ways legally. Anyway, saying someone is threatening someone with violence, that seems like the kind of thing that would be per se defamation. He refused to apologize for this, and the thread where he retracted it was used to attack me by Brett and Andy and others. And as a moderator, he did nothing about that. So it was not a real retraction, and he did not discourage this sort of attitude in the community. So he's trying not to break the law, when caught, but that is the most you can get out of him. Anyway, so that is what the community is like. Those are the people who hang out with Andy. What did Andy do? Andy used all of these identities to harass me and other ones. This is not a complete list. Some of these identities were maintained for months at a time. And here is a partial list of the comments Andy wrote on my blog. The first approximately 100 were friendly comments when he was trying to learn from me. After that, a lot of them are harassing, and the ones after that that are not harassing were sock puppets, where he was hiding his identity and tricking me, which is also bad. If I'd known that it was Andy, I would not have talked to him the same way. He was pretending to be someone interested in learning, a beginner, a newbie, stuff like that, in order to ban evade. What did his comments do? Some of them were mean. Some of them were doxing. He tried to out the identities of people in the FI community. Some of them were crude and profane. Like this one here. You can see just from the username. But other ones were trying to waste my time and be subtle. He would do things like ask a question a beginner might ask, except that he's not actually trying to learn it, so it's just trying to get attention and waste my time. Other times, he'll act like a person who disagrees and argue, but a little bit, and act like it's a friendly, reasonable debate at first, and then he'll get subtly more mean and passive-aggressive and try to undermine things. And then he's like, look, all of Curie's discussions end badly, because he was sabotaging the whole time, but he was just trying to make it not obvious that it was being sabotaged in order to trick me into wasting time responding to him, and then he could create a more and more negative discussion on purpose. And so sometimes I have discussions with people, and they go pretty well, and sometimes they go kind of badly, and he's trying to imitate the ones that go badly on purpose and create more of those, which is really nasty and hard to deal with. If all you'd ever do is post fuck Curie, then I could just delete and ignore all of his comments. And the fact that he writes hundreds and hundreds of them from different names and different IP addresses would be a problem, but that still would not be nearly as bad as what he actually did, which was a lot harder to ignore, because he kept trying to imitate the kind of person I would want to respond to, so that he could get attention, but it was in bad faith. Anyway, so this is just a small fraction of all his comments. These are ones that were very directly linked to him and were easy to post as a limited data set. So this was not all the comments at the time, and this only goes through January 2020. Andy did other things besides these comments. He has a bunch of different accounts on Twitter and Reddit and Discord. when I tried to speak to the community about the problem, on Twitter, one of the things he did was take some of his sock puppets and start flaming me and being hostile and derailing the discussion. So there's other things he did. He email spammed multiple people, including me. One of the ways he did that was he signed people up for email lists that they never subscribed for. He'd go find like 20 different email groups and put your email into it to sign you up. And then you get a message. And the thing about those messages is they send the IP address that the sign up request came from. And so when he was doing me, he used a VPN, but when he was doing someone else, he did not use a VPN. It was his main IP address. And so he was very clearly the culprit because it was the same IP. He raged on Discord and threatened someone. He said that he knows where they live and that he can hurt them, and gave an ultimatum and a time limit, and he was very, very threatening. And he said the country where the person lives, and that the person is like, basically they're not invulnerable and don't think they can get away with stuff because they're on the internet, and there's ways to make his life in person worse and hurt him. That was not done to me, it was done to someone else, but I saw the full logs. That was when that person tried to speak to Bruce, who is a community moderator, admin, leader type person in the Four Strands community, and say, hey, this person like literally threatened me. Could you ban them? This person was in both communities. Freeze. And Bruce's response was to refuse to ban the person who had sent spam emails and who had made threats. And so there's something really weird about that community and what the fuck is going on with them, that they will keep this really nasty person in their community on purpose, who's just a pseudonym. Like, they won't even ban his main pseudonym and make him like switch to a different pseudonym. Like, they won't even try to get rid of him at all. So to summarize the Andy stuff. So he showed up like a lot of different people have, and had some questions and started learning about FI stuff. And that was around late 2018, August 2018. He was interested in the intellectual dark web. He'd read some David Deutsch. And we had some discussions, and it was okay, nothing special, nothing awful. And then he got mad about something, and he raged. And then a couple days later, he apologized. And then a couple days later, he got mad about something else and raged and left. I think some of it was politics stuff. He thought I was anti-immigrant and was really offended by that. He's like worked with Mexican immigrants or something. That could have been one of the other rage quits, though. Like, I don't remember offhand which is which. So he quit, and then the harassment started the day after Andy quit. And what IP address did it start from? Andy's main IP address. And so I emailed Andy, like, hey, can you just, like, fuck off? Like, if you want to leave, just leave me alone, and we'll part ways. But stop posting these harassing comments on my blog. And he wrote back, like, what are you talking about? I'm not harassing your blog. And anyway, there's no way you would know I was harassing your blog if I was, because I use a VPN. And I wrote back, you wrote like 100 comments from the same IP address. You apparently don't use a VPN. And now the harassing comments are coming from the same IP. And then he did not respond. And the harassing comments stopped for a while. I thought that was the end of it. So there's a time gap somewhere around here. So like around here, he started harassing me. This is like a month or a little bit more after he first showed up. And we get these harassing comments in right, okay, so this is 2018 and it jumps to 2019. So here we go, 2018, and I get him to leave, and then in 2019, he comes back. There's a big gap. So he left for a while. This gap is not accurate, though. There were quite a few times he came back and harassed me in the middle. They're just not in this particular data set. But I found some. But he was actually AFK, largely AFK from the internet for like 6 months. You can see it on his Reddit accounts and Twitter and stuff, that he almost entirely stopped posting for around half a year. So that wasn't even about me. Like, I think it was partly just a coincidence that he got busy in person and left. which is one of the things that connects his many identities, as they all disappeared for the same 6-month period. Anyway, so he came back, started doing more harassing, but there was a gap and different identities, and I didn't know who it was. Wait, these are just from his main IP address. I guess I should have known. I often do not check IP addresses on people or anything, like especially back then. Anyways, but what happened was he came back on fake identities and pretended to be friendly and tried to learn from me again for a while. So he made up the identity The Rat, and he made up the identity St. Augustine. And he came on Discord, which is where he primarily talked with the new identities. And he had lots of questions for me and was interested in FI stuff for months and months with these identities. And what happened was on these identities, The Rat and Augustine, he was friendly. And I had no idea that they were the same person or that they were Andy. And then simultaneously, I was getting anonymous harassment on my blog, and I had no idea where it was coming from. So he had two identities being friendly, but also would just post on a variety of different names, different IP addresses, etc., to attack me on my blog. And some of it was just open flaming, and some of it was the subtle stuff that's hard to figure out what's going on. And so I had this ongoing problem. And what ended up happening was I connected the accounts together and figured out that The Rat and Augustine were both Andy, and that also approximately all of the negative anonymous comments on my blog were also from Andy. All the same guy. As a clarification, I'm not 100% sure that it's one person. What I can tell you is it's like one IP address, one computer, but it could be like two roommates, or could be a guy and his son, and they both work together, something like that. So he uses VPNs and has used over 100 different IP addresses. However, there's a few ways I link things together. One is with these security IDs. I had set these up previously and forgotten about them for a few years. But it is a security feature that can link different posters together, which I had used when someone else was ban evading in the past and using VPNs, so I needed some way to link their comments together and be able to get rid of them. And so I set up the security IDs, and then I used them a handful of times. And the person was like, basically they were like, oh, Elliott can tell when it's me. It makes sense. He was the one who recommended VPNs to people, and he knows how to beat them and still know when it's me. And then the person gave up and left. And so that one didn't last too long once I had the security IDs, although before that they were pretty persistent, so that was a hassle. Anyways, so fortunately I had these security IDs already set up and active before Andy showed up, and then I was able to go back and link everything together. So I didn't realize there was a problem, but I already had the security measure. And so I warned him, I said I'd caught him, asked him to leave. He would not, he kept going, so I wrote this blog post with this giant data dump. And then he freaked the fuck out, and he thought that he had lost, and he gave up, and he started deleting his social media accounts. I have voice recordings of him. He was very hesitant to go on voice, but then he got really tempted because he wanted to discuss veganism, and he went on voice a couple times. Here's one of the spam emails that he sent where he's trying to sign someone up for a mailing list. A brief comment on the doxing, financial fraud, threat. So he said, when you hurt children in the process, you've crossed a line. I'm sure there's ways to make your life difficult, particularly in, and then the name of the person's country. You think I'm joking around here or something? Fix it. I won't ask again. You have 24 hours to obey my demands. Fix it. That's simple. So this is threatening. On a related note, one of his fake names was talking with Alan Forster and tried to lure him into an IRL meetup. He said, oh no, I'm not an Andy sock puppet. You know, I had already caught that sock puppet. I knew it was Andy. I told Alan. Alan knew it was Andy. And the person was trying to DM Alan and tell him that he was not an Andy sock puppet and he would prove it, and that he lived near Alan and come meet up with him. So that was really nasty. Lying to someone on the internet and then trying to get them to go to a particular location, IRL, and like try to schedule a meetup. when you are a criminal harasser is really, really bad. Similar to the threatening thing. It was on a different continent than where Andy lives. I assume he would have just, like, not showed up. I think he was just lying and figures that it would add credibility if he claimed to be willing to meet up. But it could be more nefarious than that. Like, he might know a criminal in Alan's country who could go to that meetup and do harm. Like, you never know. Some of these online stalker people, sometimes they cross the line into actually doing IRL harm. The majority don't, but some do, and you never know. And when they're putting significant effort, like he repeatedly tried to convince Alan to go to a meetup, that's kind of scary and disturbing. Alan said no. Alan did not go to the meetup. So this guy did very serious harassment over many months, many IP addresses, many fake names. And I caught him. I linked everything together. It was a huge hassle. It was awful, but I figured it out. And I exposed him because he would not leave when I warned him. And he freaked out. He gave up. He thought he lost. He deleted his Reddits. He deleted his Twitters. Reddit accounts, when you delete them, it's permanent. However, Twitter accounts can be undeleted, so he actually has his main Twitter back. Oh, by the way, one of the reasons I think that it's only one person is that there's only one online identity that has old stuff. The Andy identity has like a 10-year-old Twitter account and like a 6-year-old Reddit before it was deleted. Something like that. You know, many years old. Also has an old Goodreads. But if there's a second person, they have no social media history, no old accounts. All of their stuff is just like made 3 months ago or something. Or often even more recent. He really, really likes lying. He will just lie very, very aggressively and just deny everything. But what he would not ever do was address the fact that harassment came from the same IP address as his main IP address. Like, he never tried to tell a story like, oh, I moved, it must have been the guy who moved in who just by coincidence happened to also read your blog and decided to harass you. Like, he didn't come up with an implausible story like that, he just never answered it. Anyway, Felix the Palatable Cat, one of his fake identities, which was flaming me on Twitter and causing trouble. He's gotten in trouble elsewhere before as well, like on multiple subreddits. He started sock puppeting after getting in trouble with moderators on Reddit and needing someone to support him and agree with him and argue his side, so he just made his own second account. So, yeah, he posts nasty blog messages and elsewhere, but the majority have been on my blog. But also, like, he made, like, a fake Twitter and posted David Deutsch stuff, and then I said hi, and then he talked to me, and then he joined FI, and then that was just another Andy sock puppet, and it was posting nasty stuff on FI. Like, he's repeatedly used sock puppets that talk about me or David Deutsch to, like, bait me and try to get attention. He did that on Reddit as well with World of Parmenides. Anyway, so there's, like, flame blog messages and also the subtly mean ones, the ones that try to imitate beginners and waste my time. He also came to my base camp. Well, that one I don't know for sure. Most of these, like, are confirmed with various technical data, but Basecamp is just a likely guess because the timing was when he was active on my blog and harassing the blog. And so Basecamp is meant for teams that trust each other for, like, workplaces to use. And so it does not have good security features, and I had a public invite, and he joined, and then he vandalized it and started deleting other people's stuff in addition to posting harassing messages and derailing messages. But you can just delete other people's stuff because it's based on trust. So he started doing that. I kicked him off, but he also created multiple projects, and as the owner, it didn't notify me and I couldn't see them. And he created, like, the team headquarters or something, and then I couldn't create my own team headquarters since he'd already made one that I couldn't see. And so it was a hassle. He did a bunch of vandalism. Pretty sure it was him. So, point is that he harasses my personal spaces, and also if I go anywhere else on the internet, he harasses that. I can't get away from him. I can't be left alone. He stalked me to less wrong and disrupted my discussions there when I tried to talk to them about Yudkowsky's very long book that I read, and I wanted to talk with him about it, and he fucked that up, which was really nasty. And there's no, they have no demands, they have no stated grievances, there's no terms for truth, there's nothing that I could say or do where they would just ever leave me alone. What I've done is I've disabled the comments on my blog. That was what I had to do, and I have not been posting on any other sites where they could harass me. The only place I'm posting right now is my own forum, a new forum with a paywall, because I thought maybe that Andy would not have a way to use sock puppets with financial info and pay money. And so far that has worked. He also doesn't have a lot of money. But I think the issue is probably more about the identity thing than the amount of money. Because I made it pretty cheap because I wanted other people to be able to join and discuss. But I think that paying money and hiding your identity is harder, so he hasn't done that so far. So that was the original post about Andy and also about the community and the very negative, nasty reactions from all the community leaders. And then this one is a harassment update. It has new stuff that he posted, like, "Are you Jewish? My guy, you Jewish?" 17,000 word copy paste from Wikipedia, 14,000 word copy paste from Wikipedia, Jewish stuff, Trump stuff. So I just wanted to let people know the harassment was still happening. So this one is about documenting the connections between Andy and David Deutsch. And I wrote this after he used the Periogo fake account, which again showed up after a break, pretended to be friendly, tried to learn things from me and ask questions like a beginner. And a lot of the times when he does that, he lasts like 3 messages before it starts getting more hostile and he starts destroying the conversation on purpose. But this one was like several weeks of pretending to be friendly before trolling me on Less Wrong and trying to destroy my ability to talk about philosophy with other people. So I documented some of the connections between him and David Deutsch. So Luli Tanit is basically David Deutsch's right-hand man, like closest friend, associate. And she has friendly tweets with Andy. She said we need to use force and threats, which she called a useful technology. This was not directly related, but it's the kind of attitude that results in communities that use force and threats and harassment. Anyway, there are sources and things. This is an archive.is, so I'm getting captured. So this particular example, Andy made a list of the community. So he was taking the role for himself of community organizer, community manager, and he made a Twitter list with approximately 50 crit rats on it. Crit rats being the name of the David Deutsch fan community. And Luli responded to Andy as a leader in the community with the comment, "Oh my god, it's nearly everyone, fantastic." She was promoting him being a community leader. This is after he was caught with all the sock puppets and all the harassment, and she knew that, and her response was to refuse to respond about it, and then to go on Twitter and publicly promote and help Andy make friends in the community and meet other people in the community and so on. So Sarah Fitzclarridge, David's TCS co-founder, follows Andy on Twitter. Her husband not only follows Andy, but talks with him a bunch. Her husband also has a history of hating me. So does Sarah. Her husband tried to recruit someone to have a Hating Elliott forum, where the goal of the forum was to stick a red-hot poker up my ass. And that was years before Andy. And then he found Andy and started tweeting with him, and probably has private chats with him about how much they hate me or something, and encourages him. Brett tweets with Andy, 3 examples. Brett is promoted on DD's website, and he's tweeting with Andy, the criminal who has been harassing me. Sam Cupers published a physics paper co-authored with David Deutsch, promoted on DD's website, tweets with Andy. Bruce Nielsen is a 4strands leader and moderator. He's one of the community organizers in the fan community, tweets with Andy repeatedly. He's still doing it like months later as well. There are many more examples after this. Aaron Stuppel, another community leader moderator, tweets with Andy. Dennis, Another one, Tweets with Andy, also plagiarized me and David a lot in a book. This community has also done things like mass flagging my tweets to get my Twitter account locked, and probably mass flagging my Amazon review of the plagiarized book, saying, hey, these ideas were taken from David and Elliott. That got deleted, probably due to mass flagging from this community. So those are some of their other activities. Now the thing about Dennis, he was also the guy who libeled me and lied that I had threatened him with violence. But he's also the person associated with the DDoSing that started happening to my blog. My blog has been DDoSed several times, and it started after Dennis plagiarized me. So I emailed Dennis about the plagiarism with one example, and he wrote back that he doesn't want to fix the errors one by one. Could I please send him all the problems in the whole book all at once? Which is a lot to ask. That's a lot of work. It's not my job to like edit his book and fix everything for him. But anyways, I sent him a bunch of stuff, not everything. And his response was, this is too long, so I'm not going to read it. So literally, he's like, don't send one at a time, send everything. And then I sent him some stuff, and he's like, too much, not going to read. So will not fix the plagiarism in this book. But the thing is, when I sent him the info, it was in the form of a draft blog post. So, like, here's all the plagiarism, and also, you know, if you don't do anything, I'm just going to blog this. And before I blogged it, I started getting DDoSed. So I'm like, okay, either he's DDoSing me, or he told someone, and they're DDoSing me. And so I asked, like, did you tell anyone? And he did not answer and wouldn't give any information about who was doing the DDoSing. He did not deny being the DDoSer. He certainly did not want to help investigate it. So, yeah. Maybe Andy's the DDoSer, maybe it's Dennis, maybe it's one of their other friends. I don't know, but I've been repeatedly DDoSed, which is fucking illegal. And it should be illegal. Like, you know, that's one of the good laws. You should not be able to use computers to attack people's websites and shut them down. That is initiating force. Anyway, so all these people talk with Andy. Another thing is Andy created a BOI subreddit. Like, he has the name, the beginning of infinity, as a subreddit. This was created by Andy. And the second moderator after Andy on the group was Dennis. So, another link. DD, by the way, has promoted all these people. Like, DD went on some, like, podcast or video or something with Bruce recently. I think it was related to the Oxford Karl Popper Society. DD has promoted Dennis's work in tweets in the past, although he hasn't done it since Dennis plagiarized him in a book. I told DD, and DD did not respond, but he hasn't been promoting Dennis since then, so maybe he doesn't like being plagiarized, I don't know. Anyway, so there are all these different connections, like all the people either associated with DD or who are leaders in DD's fan community, all of them are associated with Andy. They will not ban him from the community, they keep encouraging him. So the basic thing that happened is Andy thought he lost. He thought he was caught. He deleted all the evidence, deleted all his social medias, deleted all his fake accounts, basically. And then what happened was he thought he was going to get banned from everything and he wasn't going to be able to show his face and everyone would hate him. And they didn't. They're just like, oh, you did all that stuff to Elliott? We don't mind. That's fine with us. We're not going to hate you for that. Good job. And so then he came back and started harassing again. And I have not been able to get rid of him because this whole community is supporting him. So I made it in infographic form as well. So David's direct associates, these people, and community leaders, and all of them are being friendly with Andy B in public. It's not a secret, they're not hiding it. And then at the bottom you see all this stuff Andy did wrong. Very nasty stuff. Other people did things wrong too and have harassed me, but Andy's by far the worst. So David personally tweets with Andy. Here he is, right here. He has absolutely refused to even block Andy on Twitter, let alone say a single word discouraging harassment or saying I shouldn't be harassed or telling his fans, hey guys, stop harassing. You know, none of that. And yeah, tweeting with Andy. Andy changed his Twitter name repeatedly, but this is his original main account. You can tell because the creation date on the account is back in 2010 or something. It never changes, even when he changes his name. There's other ways to tell, too. So confirmed in several ways. This is Andy's main account. Whenever he changes his name, he keeps the same following and followers, in addition to account creation date and some other things. Before these tweets where David is tweeting with Andy, the fact that it was Andy was already publicized on my blog. If David wanted to know that, he could. People in David's community, like Luli, probably already knew that. Don't know if David personally knew, but if not, it's because he's burying his head in the sand. And making zero effort to avoid encouraging Andy, because, Andy harasses me, then David responds to Andy's tweets. That is encouragement. One of Andy's major motivations is he thinks I'm David's enemy and he wants to help David. And so having approval from David encourages him to keep going. So people like David and everyone else in the community will not respond about this whole issue. Like, serious crimes happen and they're just like, nope, no comment. I mean, they don't even say no comment, they just ghost you. And not just me, like, they ghost Alan, they ghost Justin, they ghost a lot of people who, there were personal relationships for many years that have turned into straight up ghosting with no explanation, no explanation of what changed or why they're ghosting, but they just won't respond. Anyways, so I asked people to start emailing David. So I got approximately 5 different people to send David 1 email each, which I think is completely reasonable, to ask about the problem, and David responded to one. And what did he do? He lied about me. He said, as I have told Elliott several times, I don't want to hear from him, and then he accused Justin of being my proxy. And the thing is, David did not tell me that several times. He told me that 0 times, so it is a lie. And it is a lie about a factual, documented matter, and the purpose of the lie is to harm my reputation, to encourage Andy to harass me. Like, the thing he was asked to do was say, hey, Andy, don't harass Elliott. And what he did, and not just Andy, but his whole community. What he did instead was say, Elliott is awful. I won't say anything bad about Andy, but I will break the law in order to attack Elliott. So he makes it seem like I'm the bad guy, that I'm worse than Andy. He denies being the leader of any group. Like, he won't take any responsibility at all for his fan community or his personal associates or anything. There's a guy with tens of thousands of Twitter followers who's a book author, a public figure, who's given TED Talks and put a lot of work into getting a fan following, and then he says he's not the leader of any group. Yes, you are the leader of your fan group. Anyway, so in this post, I went through, here are all my most recent communications with David Deutsch. These are all the emails from David, my most recent ones. And I went through them, and they show, one, that he was talking with me, so it wasn't like previously he'd said, oh, we're done talking, goodbye forever, because, he's talking here, and there's a bunch of, optional friendly stuff here. So it couldn't be that he told me that he doesn't want to hear from me before that, and that it was still an active request. And then he didn't say it in any of these emails. I went through what all of these are. So I'm not a lawyer, but in my understanding, he is defaming me for the purpose of encouraging harassment, including DDoSing and other crimes. So it shows something about his level of hatred, that he'd rather break the law himself to attack me than ask people to stop harassing me. Like, he really, really badly wants me harassed, apparently. And so I wrote things about his motivation and the background context and why he doesn't like me, which he's always quite vague about, but he made a couple excuses about it. For example, with the TCS archives, this is one of his main excuses, is I wanted to publish the TCS archives, and he thought that would be bad and would harm his reputation. And so you might think that what happened was he didn't want it published, I published it, he got mad at me. However, that was not what happened. What happened was I was planning to publish it because he had told me previously that publishing it would be great and that he was in favor. Before I published it, he updated me and said he did not want it published, refused to give reasons or explain significantly. I still don't really know why he changed his mind. Like, when did he change his mind? What changed his mind? What changed? Anyways, so I found out he didn't want it published, and then I didn't publish it. I said, okay, sure, I can do you a favor and just not publish it. And he was like, oh no, I don't want a favor. You have to agree with me, but I also won't argue it with you. I couldn't do that. I couldn't, like, agree with him, but I could just do what he wanted, but that wasn't good enough. So is that what he hates me over? It doesn't really seem, that doesn't seem plausible to me. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Other things from my outline. Luli subtweets. So Luli, not so much recently, although occasionally, but years ago, before Andy primarily, she wrote a lot of tweets that were about me but didn't use my name. She attacked a lot of, one, me, and two, Ayn Rand, who she strongly associates with me, and attacking Ayn Rand is part of her way of saying FI is wrong and bad. Anyway, so she frequently was trying to create an atmosphere where she's sort of attacking FI values without naming FI, but then if people listen to her for a while, and then they encounter FI, they're going to see the clash or the conflict. And so she's trying to set up an atmosphere in the community that is anti-FI. I don't think she did that to try to create harassment. Like, I don't think that was her goal. I think she was just rationalizing her distance from FI, like attacking the thing that she was separating herself from. It was just on her mind a lot, and she was trying to justify to herself why FI is bad and why she's not successfully participating there and so on. But it caused some conflicts because people, including Andy, would come to FI and ask questions like, FI says this and Luli's tweeting this and there's a conflict and who's right and why, and they'd want to like resolve the debate in some way. Or they would just be like, FI says this, isn't it awful because reason? And then I'd recognize the reason from something Luli had been tweeting. And so it stirred up some conflict. Andy, in particular, wanted to be friends with both sides. He wanted to be friends with me and FI, and also with Luli and DD and their side at the same time, and he did not like that there was a conflict there. That bothered him. The Facebook messages are in this post here, Luli defended me, where I quote Luli telling her father figures, stop being assholes, Elliott's not jealous, he's not being mean to me. And basically, they'd been harassing me and Luli on Facebook, and she told them at length, in strong terms, to fuck off and stop demonizing me. But it goes to show what kind of people they were, and this is a few years before Andy. They were quite hateful. These people have literally joked about murdering me. Source, Luli. While I was looking into this stuff, I found out that David has a bunch of misquotes in BOI. So that's tangential, but one of the things I was wondering is if David is so smart and rational, how could he now be doing such awful, unreasonable stuff? And part of my answer is he was not as good as I thought, and the misquotes help explain that. They show that he is a shoddy scholar and not quite the great mind people thought. So it helps things fit together a bit more and make a bit more sense. And I post about how David is a social climber with quotes. So he talks about things like his plans to manage his reputation. He talks about trying to impress a sponsor with his cleverness and his depth. He talks about not being ready to present ideas like TCS and setting the world to rights, his right-wing political stuff, to the general public, which is weird because he already did. He was a TCS founder. He put his name on it. He used his book to promote it, and he spent approximately 20 years advocating TCS. And then he told me he wasn't ready to present it to the public. Too late, bro. Like, there's something really, really weird and irrational with his attitude and stuff. And that seems to be part of what he's mad at me over. And, like, it's not my fault that you spent 20 years of your adult life telling the public something and then decided you weren't ready to tell the public. But he has fears, like that a TV producer will see that he had these ideas about parenting and then not give him a 12-part TV series. So that is one of the reasons he doesn't like me, is he thinks that I'm a danger to him getting TV series. So here's another one that I don't think I've shown before, but I brought it up when I was setting up this video. So this guy, Dan Elson, is another crit rat. And he joined my Discord, and he joined my newsletter. And I don't know him, and I've never had a conversation with him. So some of the crit rats on Twitter, some of them I talked with a little, and they were friendly. And then all of a sudden, they would never talk to me again, and became completely and utterly unfriendly, all of a sudden, like, out of the blue. Like, one of them was, like, asking about AI and, like, liked some of my work and wanted more, and I sent them some links. Then later I was like, hey, and, like, tried to say something, and they just will not respond. And it's like someone gets to them, someone tells them some sort of negative gossip, and then they'll never talk to me again. And, you know, I have some pretty decent ideas about what kind of gossip it is, because, for example, David claims, falsely, that I have violated a bunch of no-contact requests. And if someone is violating a bunch of no-contact requests, if they've been told clearly and reasonably why they're not wanted, why they should go away, if they've been asked to leave and told don't contact us anymore, we already answered you, now fuck off, then it would make sense to just ignore that person too. The thing is, that never happened. No one ever gave me reasons. No one gave me a no-contact request. And I never ever get treated that way by other communities. And I've had negative or hostile interactions with a lot of communities. Like, I've been banned from forums before. And despite that, I've never had anything similar to the way the crit rats are. Their community is something else. Anyways, so this guy, he joined my forum, or he joined my Discord, and he joined my newsletter. And I saw that he was associating with the crit rats and with Dennis and Andy and stuff on Twitter. He was part of that community. So I messaged him privately and asked if he knew anything about Andy and if he was at all willing to talk about it, and said that I'd received over 500 harassing messages, and there had been doxes, threats, and spams. Would you be willing to talk about the problem at all? I was looking for someone who could bridge the communication gap, because, you know, the people encouraging Andy, and Andy himself will not discuss it, but could I talk to some crit rat who is not a leader, who would be willing to speak to me, and then would be able to speak to them, and we could try to de-escalate something, talk about a truce. So I asked him about it. He did not respond. He left my Discord server, and he unsubscribed from my newsletter, so apparently that was a no. And so this is a bit unusual and nasty, but this is only part of the story. So after this, he, like, tweeted with Andy, and some months passed and nothing really happened, and I don't know this guy at all, and whatever. However, next thing that happens is I go on this Slack called Progress Studies, made by this Jason Crawford guy who is a fan of BOI. Not made by him, but he runs it, I think. It's related to Patrick Collison. Anyways, so I joined the Slack, and I saw a crit rat on it, Aaron Stupple, one of their leaders, who had been there for a while, like a few months or something. No big deal. But so I join, and I post in the introduction channel, and I post something else, a few things. And the day after I join, Dan Elton comes on. He goes in the introduction channel, and he posts a message that screws with me in a place where I can't argue back because it's an introduction channel. He uses my full name and mischaracterizes me, says unpleasant things about me. He presented me as, he presented me as having basically the same type of relationship with David Deutsch that he does. Like, we're both just fans who don't know him at all, which is a total lie. I worked on the book. I had many, many private conversations with David. Dan Elton did not. So making those equivalent is lying about me and trying to smear my reputation and my past history. And he does that in the introduction channel in a kind of subtle way where I can't respond and, like, start a fight. But he's just screwing with me. So I DM'd him. And, you know, it's much worse in context. The context is he's been ghosting me for months. Like, to avoid talking with me, he left my newsletter and Discord. And then he comes on, and he joins the day after me. Like, I think he got messaged and told I had joined, and he came here for the express purpose of harassing me and disrupting my conversations and was stalking me. And he comes on, screws with me in public, in a place where it's completely inappropriate to screw with people, uses my name, and he does this after ghosting me for months. Like, he will not talk with me privately. He will not discuss the harassment at all. And I'm like, what the hell? Don't ghost me and then come talk to me publicly to screw with me where I can't respond. Leave me alone. Like, either respond to me or leave me alone. Pick one. You can't have it both ways. Refuse to respond to me, but also publicly screw with me. It's very unreasonable and nasty. And I don't know this guy at all. And his response was really horrible. He said, I don't have to respond to you if I don't want to. The world doesn't revolve around you. People don't owe you a response. It's like, okay, but then leave me alone. Like, if you don't like me and don't want to deal with me, just leave me alone. But he goes on to say, and there's nothing wrong with piggybacking off other people and using their name in public. So he's like, not only am I going to completely ignore you, I'm also going to keep screwing with you. And I insist on, he thinks he has a right to screw with me, to use my name however he wants, to say whatever he wants about me in public, in completely inappropriate places, and try to pick fights with me in order to disrupt my use of the Slack. Like, he thinks he should just go harass me in an introductions channel on a Slack about making progress, and that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. So at this point, I wrote a no contact request to not only him, but a bunch of crit rats, because I wanted to preemptively make it clear that when they publicly screw with me, they are violating consent. Right? He could sort of claim, oh, I didn't know that you didn't want me to screw with you in public, which is pretty hard to claim with this response DM. But anyways, I preemptively told all these people, hey, don't contact me, in order to try to head off this kind of public harassment from them. So, was not happy about that. Oh yeah, so the closest thing I ever got to a response about the anti-harassment stuff was from Ella Hoppenegger. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but something like that. Another crit rat who is interested in studying AI and trying to invent an AI. Some of them think they're making progress on that or something. I don't think they are. But anyways, she had debated on BOI a little bit and then just kind of stopped and refused to explain why and wouldn't give reasons and just withdrew from debate. Not very reasonable. However, she responded a little bit about my initial post about the anti-harassment, and she said that maybe I falsified all the evidence, as in all these IP addresses, all the dates, all the posts on my, like maybe I harassed myself and just made up all these comments. Or maybe someone else harassed me, who knows? So she thought maybe all of this was falsified and I can't prove it, and that it's a he said, she said, where I could be lying, Andy could be lying, it's like 50-50. Like, she has no way to tell. My word against his, we're equally credible. I have all this evidence that could be falsified. Andy has absolutely no evidence and no story. Hasn't stuck his neck out and exposed any details or claims to criticism. And so that is just 100% equally credible. Can't tell the difference. So that was a very, very, very biased response. And yeah, none of the leaders have ever responded to the evidence. So David, right, he lied about me. He has encouraged Andy by tweeting with Andy and by lying about me. Like, if you're asked, hey, would you tell Andy to stop? And your response is, I hate Elliott. That is a pretty clear fucking signal that you don't want to tell Andy to stop. And that you actually want it to happen. He has the entire time refused to say one word like, don't harass people, harassment is bad, or, hey guys in my community, please don't harass. Like, nothing to discourage it, nothing to delegitimize it. And just his refusal to do that when repeatedly asked makes his stance pretty clear. And he has all these social connections to Andy. Like, he personally talks with Andy, and all his friends talk with Andy. Not all, like, I'm sure he has some physics friends who don't talk with Andy, but, like, all of his Papyrian friends, it looks like, all the people who are part of the Crit Rat community, like, there's no notable David associate who does pauper stuff and is keeping their distance from Andy and being reasonable. It's like all of them are part of the problem, are involved in the bad stuff. So yeah, their community is like really shockingly toxic, and it has escalated to various harassment. And a bunch of laws have been violated, and it has been a huge problem. And I shut down my blog comments because I got fed up with being harassed all the time, hundreds of times. And there was no end in sight, no way to fix the problem, no way to get them to stop. They don't want anything. There's no terms, like, there's nothing I can do and then they'll stop. There's no, I did X wrong and they're mad at me for X, and if I retract X, they'll stop. Like, there's nothing like that. There's just no reason they're doing it. Like, the main reason for most of them, not David, is that they see me as David's enemy. They think I'm, like, on the other side and that I've criticized David For example, I wrote a blog post called something like David Deutsch smears Ayn Rand, and then I went through his anti-Ayn Rand arguments and pointed out a bunch of errors. And so stuff like that pisses them off. And I've said the occasional rude thing related to David Deutsch, or the occasional like harsh criticism. And so they've picked up on some of those and repeatedly quoted them while attacking me. Not while like trying to have a discussion about what they mind, just as like when they're attacking me, particularly to each other. So they hide a lot of their discussion, and it's hard to find out what they're saying. But in some cases, they've let people into their groups who then shared stuff with me. But then once I posted this stuff, they locked down their community more. And it has been harder to find out what they're saying and get actual evidence of specifics. So what can you do? You can ask David and his associates what the hell is up with this. You can ask David to retract his lie about me. And you can ask him to disown harassment and ask it to stop. And to negotiate, to have someone say, like, hey, if you do this, we'll do this, to try to make things better. Like, to have some sort of path to de-escalating or whatever. Like, I just want to be left alone and not have my rights violated, but they will not leave me alone, stalk me all over the internet. It's been really horrible and nasty. No one should ever have to go through stuff like this. One of the responses I've seen a couple times is, why don't you go to the police? Like, if they're really doing stuff that's that bad, the police would deal with it. And there are a few things wrong with that. One is, I don't know Andy's real name, and all the people who are friends with him online, all these crit rats, will not provide any evidence or details or say what they do or don't know. Like, they will not help find out what his real name is or make it possible to go to the police, right? So they're purposely withholding evidence to defend him and protect him from me actually going to the police. Also, you can look up a lot of examples of people having stalkers. Some of them are quite a bit worse than Andy. Like, some of them involve IRL stuff, like having a knife and being found a couple blocks away from a girl's home, in addition to a bunch of online stuff with a bunch of different identities. And in a lot of those cases, the police are super dismissive. There was an online stalker in one of the cases, I remember, who traveled to a different state to the city where the girl lived, and then he hung out outside for days in order to spot her and be able to follow her and find out her specific house. And the police caught him and sent him home back to his home state and did nothing, and did not take her fears seriously. And then, after being sent home, he traveled to her state again. And then he got caught again and confessed, and finally the police actually did something, but it really takes a lot. There have been celebrity stalker cases where the celebrities with resources and money and fans have had a lot of trouble getting the courts to do anything at all about stalkers. Or sometimes you get a restraining order and that's it, and then it doesn't really do anything because they just violated and the police won't do much. Anyways, you can look into this stuff with Twitch streamers. Some of the female Twitch streamers have been stalked by, mostly online, but sometimes it goes to IRL too, and that's really bad. Anyways, you can hear some of their stories, and some of them go through a lot worse stuff than I have and get little to no help. So no, I don't think that the police are going to do anything about this anonymous pseudonym who's posted nasty messages and may or may not have been the DDoSer. That doesn't make it okay, though. That doesn't make it reasonable. And in particular, there's all these people using their real names, such as David and Luli and Sarah, who just keep associating with this awful harasser. Some of them have done harassing things themselves too, such as David libeling me. But just the fact that they will go in public under their real names and hang out with and be friendly with the person committing crimes against me, there's a real problem there. And I think it's completely appropriate for them to get social pushback. People should be like, hey, what the hell? And ask them about it and complain. So what can you do? Complain to these people, question them about it, criticize. Ask them what the fuck they're doing. Isn't this completely unreasonable? Is there any justification for it? Do they have any arguments, or are they just completely in the wrong? Because they haven't given any arguments and seem to be just really bad people who every decent person should shun. If they want to be like these, no one should have any respect for them. So, yeah, that's the general idea of the story.